The sun rose over a quiet, broken world. Streets that once echoed with laughter now lay in eerie silence. Abandoned cars lined highways like metal tombstones, and shattered windows whispered of chaos long past. In a remote sector of the American Midwest, known as Redstone County, the fight for humanity's survival had only just begun. 6 days earlier, the first signs of the infection had appeared, a violent sickness that turned people into mindless, ravenous predators. At first, the government had assured everyone it was under control. But when the military outposts in 3 major cities went dark within 24 hours, panic consumed the nation like wildfire. Now, there were no more daily broadcasts. No more promises of a cure. No more organized resistance. Just silence, and the growing groans of the undead. Among the scattered remains of society, a new force emerged, not from the government, but from the ordinary, the forgotten, and the hardened. Fighters, survivors, and ex-military personnel, those who refused to die quietly. They called themselves the Red Hawks. Led by former U.S. Army Sergeant Mason Riker, they operated from an old prison-turned-fortress hidden deep in the pine woods, known simply as the Bastion. Riker stood on the upper rampart, scanning the tree line with a pair of weather-worn binoculars. His jaw was set, and his eyes, though tired, burned with purpose. "They're getting closer," he muttered. Beside him stood Dr. Elena Cordell, a virologist who had barely escaped a failed quarantine zone. She wasn't a fighter, but her knowledge made her just as vital. She adjusted her glasses and nodded. "If the swarm reaches this far inland, we'll lose everything. We need to move the civilians to the fallback shelter." Riker lowered the binoculars. "We're not abandoning the Bastion yet. I've got a team going out at first light. If we can recover the supply drop near the old airfield, we might have enough to last another 2 weeks." From below, the familiar sound of the gate being unlatched signaled the return of a patrol. Boots crunched gravel as the scout team entered, dirty, bloodied, but alive. At the front was Kyle Blade Matthews, Riker's second-in-command. He removed his helmet, revealing a cut over his eyebrow and eyes that didn't blink enough. "We spotted a cluster of roamers on the highway, about 100 strong," Blade said. "They weren't wandering like usual. They were moving together. Like they were following something." Riker's brow furrowed. "Like what?" "We're not sure. But whatever it wasn't human." Tension thickened in the air like smoke. Dr. Cordell spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "There have been rumors about the virus evolving. Some survivors in the southern zones reported sightings of a new type, stronger, smarter. One even said it, spoke." Riker refused to flinch. "No more rumors. We deal with what's in front of us. Prep the team. We leave in 2 hours." As night crept in, the Bastion's walls glowed with torchlight and flood lamps. Inside, families huddled together, while fighters checked their weapons and armor. Each one knew the cost of stepping outside the walls, but they also knew what happened if no one did. Riker's team, codenamed Echo 6, assembled near the main gate. Alongside Blade stood Jayla, a sniper with a dark past and a sharp eye, Malik, a former firefighter turned heavy weapons specialist, and June, the tech genius who could turn junk into working drones. They were the best hope dead America had. "Remember," Riker addressed the team, "we're not out there to play hero. We're recovering the crate, checking the airfield perimeter, and returning before sundown. Minimal risk, maximum gain." But nothing in dead America was ever that simple. They moved out under the dim early light, traveling through overgrown roads and scorched fields. The world smelled of ash and decay. Every shadow was a possible death trap. The deeper they went, the more the silence grew, until they reached the outskirts of the airfield. What they saw wasn't just disturbing, it was impossible. The supply crate was there, just as the drone drop coordinates had indicated. But surrounding it, at precise distances, were the bodies of nearly 50 zombies, stacked in a circular pattern like they had been placed there, arranged. Jayla raised her scope, scanning the area. "This doesn't look like a fight. Looks like a message." Before Riker could respond, the wind shifted, and with it came a new sound. Not the usual moans of the undead. This was a low, guttural chant. Almost rhythmic. Out of the shadows emerged a figure. Tall, humanoid, but moving with unnatural grace. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. It did not charge. It watched. Riker slowly raised his rifle. Everyone, back. Now. Too late. The creature opened its mouth, revealing rows of jagged, unnatural teeth. And then it whispered one word. Run. To be continued in Part 2, The New Breed. The moment the creature spoke, time seemed to freeze. Riker's heart pounded in his chest, his grip tightening on the rifle. The thing before them wasn't just another zombie, it was something else entirely. It watched them with awareness, something the infected were never supposed to have. Its eyes scanned each member of Echo 6 with calm precision, as if it were assessing. Then, with inhuman speed, it vanished into the tree line. Contact lost. Jayla shouted, pivoting her scope. It's fast. Too fast. Fall back. Riker barked. Now. Echo 6 moved as a unit, weapons drawn, eyes on every shadow. Mallet grabbed the supply crate with one arm and held his shotgun with the other, dragging the payload through the weeds. Distant groans began to rise, echoing from the woods around them. The familiar sound of the undead, but it was wrong, organized, alert, surrounding them. They're flanking us, Blade hissed. Zombies don't flank. They do now, Riker said grimly. A half-circle of undead emerged through the underbrush, not shambling, but stalking. Their heads jerked erratically, their mouths twitching, but they didn't charge right away. They waited. Watching. Jayla dropped 2 of them with clean headshots. They're testing our range. They've never done this. June. Pop smoke. Riker shouted. June pulled a small device from her belt and slammed it to the ground. A flash of blue light burst, releasing thick synthetic smoke. Echo 6 vanished into the cloud and sprinted toward their fallback vehicle, an armored truck parked 2 miles away. The groans gave way to shrieks as the zombies gave chase. Branches snapped. Feet thundered against dead leaves. Malik let the crate go and turned to cover their rear, his machine gun thumping as it tore through the approaching horde. Go, he yelled. I'll catch up. You better. Blade shouted back. The team broke through the last stretch of woods, stumbling onto the cracked asphalt of the old service road. Their truck stood waiting, engine running thanks to the AI auto-idle June had rigged. Riker jumped behind the wheel while the others piled in. Just as Malik burst out of the trees, the creature reappeared, 10 feet behind him. It didn't attack. Instead, it stopped just at the edge of the forest and watched as they escaped. Again, watching. As the truck tore down the road, Riker glanced in the rearview mirror. That thing wasn't hunting them for food. It was observing. Studying. Planning. Back at the bastion, tension rippled through the fighters and civilians alike. The perimeter guards had seen the smoke plume. Riker's team returned with the supply crate intact, but their report left everyone uneasy. In the war room, under flickering LED lights, Riker laid it all out. They're evolving. That thing, it wasn't like the others. It had intelligence. Strategy. It let us go. Dr. Cordell looked pale. Then we're dealing with something far more dangerous than infection. If the virus has begun mutating the brain to this degree, it's no longer just about survival. It's a war of species. Jayla tossed her rifle onto the table. We need to change our tactics. We've been fighting mindless ghouls. But these are soldiers. And if they're soldiers, Blade added, someone, or something, is leading them. Murmurs filled the room. The implications were terrifying. The undead had always been a chaotic force, a mindless swarm. But if there was a hierarchy forming? If the infected could organize? The fighters of Dead America were no longer dealing with a plague. They were dealing with an army. Riker leaned forward. We need answers. Cordell, I want you to analyze any samples you can. June, comb through the drone surveillance, we need eyes on any strange formations or movements. Blade, you and Jayla start drafting a strike protocol. I want this creature hunted. Cordell hesitated. If you kill it before I can get a sample, we lose our chance to understand what's happening. If we don't kill it, it may understand us first, Riker said coldly. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. The moon hung high, casting long shadows on the land below. Deep within those shadows, in a half-collapsed barn miles from the bastion, the creature that had watched Echo 6 now knelt in silence. Around it, dozens of infected knelt too, waiting patiently. And behind them, from the darkness of the barn loft, another figure emerged. Larger. Covered in the remnants of tactical armor. A grotesque fusion of soldier and beast. Its voice was guttural, like grinding metal. Soon, it growled. The swarm didn't respond. They didn't need to. They understood. To be continued in Part 3, The Enemy You Can't Predict. 3 days had passed since the encounter at the airfield, but the unease inside the bastion hadn't faded. The fighters were training harder, the civilians were whispering more, and Riker couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The surveillance drones hadn't picked up anything unusual, no major swarm movement, no heat signatures beyond the standard infected clusters, but that only made things worse. The infected had always been predictable. Loud, fast, and without strategy. Now they were quiet. Hidden. Waiting. In the command room, Riker stood over a large, laminated map spread across a makeshift table. Red pins marked past attacks. Blue pins marked supply drops. A new color, black, marked the airfield. The spot where everything changed. June tapped away at her laptop nearby, scanning drone footage in accelerated time. I'm telling you, Riker, it's like they vanished. The moment we pulled out, they retreated back into the woods. No tracks. No trails. Just, gone. That's not random, Riker muttered. That's discipline. At that moment, Blade entered the room, helmet under one arm, sweat clinging to his brow. We've got trouble. Eastern Patrol found one of the forward camps, wiped out. Riker's eyes narrowed. Casualties? No bodies. No signs of a fight. Just blood. And a message. He handed Riker a photo. Spray painted across the side of a burned-out supply truck were 2 chilling words, "Stay back." Jayla joined them, sliding a new set of surveillance stills onto the table. This was taken 2 hours ago, look at the formation. The image showed a group of infected standing perfectly still in an open field. Each one was spaced exactly 5 feet apart. Their bodies faced a single direction, toward the north. Toward the bastion. They're sending a warning, Jayla said. No, Riker said grimly. They're sending a threat. Back in the lab, Dr. Cordell studied samples from the blood-soaked site. Under her microscope, she noticed something horrifying. The infected cells were no longer dormant, they were organizing, regenerating in response to environmental changes. Adapting. This isn't a virus anymore, she whispered. It's learning. By evening, Echo 6 was assembled once more, this time preparing for a recon strike. A report had come in from a Southern survivor group. A figure in a black tactical vest had been seen moving with a small group of the infected, controlling them. It's him, Riker said. The armored one. The big one. He's not just part of this new breed, he's leading it. They left in silence, cutting through narrow valleys and twisted forests, heading toward the coordinates. The sun dipped low, and shadows thickened across the hills. The closer they got, the more unnatural the forest felt. No birds. No wind. Just silence. June tapped her wrist console. Drone feed just picked up movement ahead. Looks like a gathering. Around 20 infected, standing in a half circle. Set the perimeter, Riker ordered. We get eyes on their leader. We find out what he wants. They crawled through the underbrush, rifles raised, breaths low. From behind a moss-covered ridge, they spotted the scene. The infected weren't just standing, they were listening. The armored creature stood in the center, addressing them. Not with words, but with gestures, guttural growls, and strange signals. It had intelligence, presence, and authority. But what chilled them most was what lay behind the creature, a giant metal cage, crude, welded together from pipes and fence panels. Inside it were two terrified human survivors. Hostages, Jayla whispered. They're taking hostages now? Before they could act, June's wrist console gave a faint beep, a low battery warning. The creature's head snapped toward them. Move! Riker shouted. Chaos erupted. The infected charged, shrieking with unnatural speed. Echo 6 opened fire, cutting down the first wave. Jayla took down 3 in seconds, but more kept coming. Blade and Malik held the left flank while Riker and June fell back toward the hill. As they retreated, Riker caught one last glimpse of the armored leader standing tall, watching from the firelit field. It didn't move. Didn't flinch. It just raised its hand, and the infected froze mid-charge, stopping just feet from their prey. Then, the creature let them go. Again. Why does it keep sparing us? June gasped as they fled. Riker didn't answer. He was thinking the same thing. Back at the bastion, Dr. Cordell waited on the radio, voice tense. What did you see? A leader, Riker said. A strategist. And it wants us to know it's coming. Cordell's voice dropped to a whisper. Then we may already be too late. Far beyond the hills, in the ruins of an old power station, the creature knelt before a large, rotting map of the region. Its clawed finger traced a circle around one place. The bastion. It was done observing. The next move would be war. To be continued in Part 4, the bastion under siege. Rain pounded against the metal rooftops of the bastion, washing over floodlights and rusted barricades. Inside the walls, the tension was thick. Every fighter had been called in. Civilians were moved to the lower levels of the bunker. No one asked questions anymore, they all felt it in their bones. Something was coming. Riker stood atop the lookout tower, scanning the horizon through a pair of night vision binoculars. The forest ahead was pitch black. Too still. Too quiet. We should have left by now, Blade muttered beside him. This place isn't built to hold off an organized assault. We don't run, Riker replied. Not until we know exactly what we're up against. Down below, Echo 6 was spread across key positions. Jayla manned the southern watchtower with her sniper scope trained. Malik and June were reinforcing the western gate, adding explosive traps, steel bracing, and perimeter sensors. The fighters of Dead America weren't just survivors anymore, they were a resistance. Inside the command center, Dr. Cordell studied the map with growing dread. They've gone completely silent since your last recon mission. No sightings. No movement. That's not retreat, that's coordination. They're preparing for something big. Suddenly, the base-wide alarm wailed, an ugly, rattling siren that hadn't been triggered since the early days of the outbreak. Jayla's voice crackled over the radio. Movement in the tree line. A lot of it. Riker grabbed the radio. Sound the alert. Battle stations, now. The fighters rushed into position, rifles ready, adrenaline high. As the floodlights turned toward the trees, something horrifying emerged, not just a swarm of the undead, but a formation. They moved in rows. Steady. Silent. No screams. No flailing limbs. Just focus and deadly intent. Then came the signal. From behind the swarm, the armored leader stepped into view. It raised one fist and pointed at the bastion. The horde erupted forward. Gunfire lit up the night. Explosions thundered as traps triggered along the outer fences. Zombies flew through the air in twisted pieces, but more surged in behind them. Like ants. Tireless. Unstoppable. Hold the gate. Malik shouted. We lose that, we lose everything. The western barricade groaned under pressure as dozens of infected slammed into it. June triggered the arc towers, sending crackling electricity through the metal beams. Zombies fried midair. Still, they kept coming. On the east wall, Jayla picked off targets one by one. Her breath steady, her aim precise. They're protecting the big one. Every time I line up a shot, one of them blocks it. In the courtyard, Blade and Riker fought back to back, their rifles emptying clip after clip. Smoke, screams, and fire swirled around them. Then, from the shadows, a new nightmare appeared. A mutated infected, a massive, hulking brute with thick skin and reinforced limbs, smashed through a storage container like it was cardboard. Its chest bore remnants of armor. Its eyes burned red. Brute incoming, someone screamed. Take it down. Riker ordered. The brute let out a bone-chilling roar and charged. Bullets barely slowed it. It swatted fighters aside like flies. June fired a grenade launcher, direct hit to the shoulder, but it kept moving, blood spraying, jaws wide. Malik leapt from the second floor with a mounted spike in hand and drove it into the brute's spine. The monster shrieked and collapsed, twitching violently. The crowd of infected hesitated, just for a moment. That hesitation was enough. Jayla's shot rang out, and this time, she didn't miss. The round slammed into the armored leader's shoulder, staggering it. Not killing it, but drawing blood. The horde paused. All of them. As if reacting to his pain. As if feeling it. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the horde retreated. The fighters stood stunned, covered in blood and smoke. The bastion was damaged. Supplies were low. Some had died. But the walls still stood. Why did they pull back? Blade asked, panting. They had us, Malik added. They could have finished it. Riker narrowed his eyes. This wasn't about taking the bastion. This was a test. Dr. Cordell emerged, holding a vial of the mutated brute's blood. They wanted to see how far we'd go. How much we'd fight back. How many we'd lose. Jayla shook her head. That means next time, they won't pull back. No, Riker said, staring into the trees. Next time, they won't need to. Deep in the forest, the armored leader knelt as robed infected surrounded it. One of the robed figures reached out and touched its wound. It hissed in some guttural language. The leader nodded. This was just the beginning. To be continued in Part 5, The Broken Line. The smoke still hung thick over the bastion, mixing with the bitter stench of scorched flesh and burned metal. Morning brought no peace, only the eerie quiet of survival. The kind that made your stomach twist, because everyone knew it wouldn't last. Riker stood near the collapsed east wall, inspecting the damage with bloodshot eyes. Welders worked feverishly, sparks flying, while medics moved injured fighters to the lower bunkers. But they were stretched thin. Too thin. We can't take another hit like that, Jayla said beside him, arms folded, eyes scanning the ruined perimeter. Supplies are low. Ammunition's tighter. And morale's worse than I've ever seen. Riker didn't respond right away. He stared toward the treeline where the armored leader had vanished. They didn't just break the wall. They broke our rhythm. Our sense of safety. Down in the infirmary, Dr. Cordell finished examining the blood sample from the brute. She looked pale, shaken. The cells weren't just mutating, they were responding to attacks, adapting to chemical signatures, adjusting to electrical shocks. This wasn't natural evolution. It was guided. Calculated. I'm seeing viral responses that are impossible, she said into her recorder. As if something is teaching them how to evolve. The question is, who, or what, is doing the teaching? Back in the courtyard, Blade, Malik, and June were overseeing what remained of the weapons cache. Grenades, few. Ammo, nearly gone. Automatic turrets, offline due to damaged circuits. We're crippled, June muttered. They knew exactly where to hit us. No wasted effort. They weren't just testing our defense, Malik added grimly. They were mapping it. Just then, a distress call came in over the radio, static mixed with a panicked voice. This is Haven Outpost 3, under heavy assault, need backup, they're coming through the water lines, repeat, underground. Then, silence. Jayla's expression turned cold. The outposts were meant to delay them. Not crumble. They've figured out the tunnels, Riker muttered. They're not just breaching walls, they're coming from below. He gathered Echo 6 immediately. They couldn't wait. If the infected were spreading underground, it was only a matter of time before they surfaced inside the bastion itself. Dr. Cordell met them before they left. You need to know this, if those infected reach any chemical labs or hospitals, they could absorb whatever's left behind and mutate again. They're seeking more than flesh. They're collecting. Riker didn't like the sound of that. He gave a quick nod. Then we stop them before they gather anything else. Echo 6 descended into the old utility tunnels, a labyrinth of rusted pipes, dripping ceilings, and echoing silence. Jayla led the way, infrared scope sweeping each corner. June whispered, if they've infected the water system, they could already be inside the drinking supply. They haven't yet, Riker said. Otherwise, we'd already be dead. Suddenly, a distant metallic clang echoed from deeper in the tunnel. They moved fast, weapons up, lights steady. And then, they found it. A group of infected were hunched over what looked like a pile of tech scavenged from Haven Outpost 3. They weren't just gathering it, they were reassembling it. Jayla's eyes widened. Are they building something? Before they could act, the armored leader stepped into view from behind the horde. It turned its head slowly, recognizing Riker, and raised one hand. The infected surged forward. Gunfire exploded through the tunnels. Blade launched a flash charge, lighting the tight corridor with a blinding pulse. June dropped a mine at the nearest intersection, sealing it with fire. But the infected kept coming, faster, angrier, and more precise. Riker realized too late, this wasn't a kill zone. It was a trap. They lured us here, he shouted. Back! Fall back now! But the exit collapsed behind them with a violent tremor. Part of the ceiling gave way, trapping Jayla and Malik behind twisted beams and falling debris. Go! Jayla shouted, raising her rifle. We'll cover you. No! Riker started toward her, but Malik fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Keep the line alive, Riker. With a final glance, Riker turned and escaped down a side tunnel with June and Blade, smoke and screams following them into the dark. By the time they surfaced through an old sewer grate half a mile from the bastion, the sun was gone, and so were two of their own. They stumbled into the perimeter lights, bloodied, exhausted, and changed. The line's broken, Riker said quietly. They're not coming in force anymore. They're cutting us apart, piece by piece. Inside the bastion, Dr. Cordell analyzed a new vial recovered from the tunnel. The infected weren't just evolving. They were communicating. To be continued in Part 6, Signals in the Dark. The control room of the bastion buzzed with tension as Dr. Cordell played the eerie audio loop again. It had been extracted from a signal tower recovered near the collapsed tunnel, faint, garbled, and unsettling. The team listened closely. It wasn't just static. Underneath, something rhythmic pulsed, clicks, tones, almost like sonar. This isn't just noise, Cordell said. It's pattern communication. And the infected are responding to it. Riker leaned over the desk, jaw clenched. Are you saying they're using sound to command each other? Yes, she nodded. Like a hive. But it's more advanced, these tones adapt based on environment. Each region seems to have its own language. They're coordinating across vast distances. Jayla and Malik were still missing. 2 days since the tunnel ambush. No signals, no signs. And the enemy was getting smarter, bolder, and more precise. We need to find the source of the signal, Riker decided. If they're being guided by a central beacon, we destroy it. Cut the head off before the body swarms. June scanned the regional maps. We picked up the strongest transmission spike coming from what used to be Fort Wallace. Deep in the quarantine zone. Blade raised an eyebrow. Fort Wallace? That place was nuked during the second wave. Nothing's supposed to be alive there. Riker's voice was steady. Exactly. Which makes it the perfect place to hide. Within an hour, Echo 6, what was left of it, was on the move, traveling in a stolen armored rover retrofitted with silent motors and thermal shielding. Their goal, reach Fort Wallace undetected, locate the transmission beacon, and destroy it. As they neared the dead zone, the world changed. The skies above Fort Wallace were an eerie, orange haze. Dead trees jutted from the ground like blackened spears. The air was thick, unnatural, humming faintly with electromagnetic interference. No animals. No birds. No signs of normal decay. Just silence, and the pulse of something not human. June muttered, "Feels like we're driving into the heart of something ancient." The roads were cracked, buildings flattened or melted from the impact of whatever had destroyed the fort. But then, at the center of the destruction, they found it, a massive antenna array half submerged in rubble, blinking faint red lights. At its base was a twisted nest of machinery and corpse matter, fused together. Suddenly, the hum grew louder. "Movement!" Blade called out. Infected began to emerge, not from the trees or buildings, but from beneath the concrete, rising slowly, like sleepers waking to an alarm. But something was wrong with these. Their flesh was fused with metal. Some had antenna-like appendages. Others had hollow eyes that glowed faint blue. June gasped. "These aren't just infected, they're receivers." The squad opened fire. Precise bursts. Controlled chaos. But every infected that fell was quickly replaced. They were swarming to protect the beacon like bees to a queen. Riker realized, they're not attacking. They're shielding it. "Go!" Blade shouted. "Cover me!" He sprinted toward the base of the beacon with an EMP charge strapped to his chest. June and Riker held the line, bullets shredding the creatures as they charged. The EMP's timer ticked down. Blade reached the core. He placed the charge, slammed the activator, and turned to see a monstrous figure emerge from the structure. The armored leader. Its body now fused with cables and hardened plating. A grotesque mix of biology and signal tech. It lunged, but Blade grinned. Too late. Boom! The shockwave rippled through the air. The beacon collapsed, the leader shrieked in digital agony, and the infected screamed as the signal cut out, causing them to fall, twitching violently before going completely still. Silence returned. Riker rushed forward, finding Blade half buried in debris but alive. Bloodied, coughing, but smiling. "Told you I'd make it loud." Back at the bastion, Dr. Cordell watched as dozens of red dots vanished from the tracking map. "We cut off their control node. They're in chaos." But her relief didn't last long. A new feed began lighting up, this time, not red dots, but blue. A different frequency. A new network. Jayla's voice suddenly broke over the comms. Static-filled and weak. "Riker, come in." Everyone froze. "Malik and I, not dead. Captured. We're inside something, it's not just a hive. It's a machine. They're building something bigger. Smarter. You have to shut it down before." The signal cut out. Riker stared at the comm, his grip tightening. They're not just evolving. They're organizing. And if they're building machines. He turned to the others. Then the real war hasn't even started yet. To be continued in Part 7, The Machine Awakens. The silence following Jayla's broken transmission echoed louder than gunfire inside the bastion. Riker stared at the blank screen. Her voice had sounded strained. Weak. But alive. And something in her last words kept playing in his head. They're building something bigger, smarter. Dr. Cordell confirmed it. Whatever control node we destroyed at Fort Wallace, it wasn't the source. It was just a relay. There's something deeper, and more dangerous. The new signals lighting up across their sensors were different. Not erratic like the others. These were deliberate. Clean. Purposeful. The infected were no longer just responding to commands, they were predicting movements. Organizing flanks. Laying traps. This isn't a swarm anymore, Cordell said. It's an army. Riker called an emergency war council. The Bastion's command chamber filled with the last of the veteran fighters, their expressions grim, weapons slung and eyes hollowed by fatigue. Blade sat with his arm in a brace, face still bruised from the blast at Fort Wallace. June stood by Riker, maps spread across the table. We tracked Jayla's signal to an abandoned research zone east of the quarantine belt, June said. Used to be known as Zone Theta. Black Site Lab. Off the books. Government wiped it off maps 10 years ago. Cordell added, that's where the virus may have started, and it might be where this machine intelligence evolved. They all turned to Riker. We've fought like survivors long enough, he said. Now we fight like soldiers. The mission, penetrate Zone Theta. Locate the source of the new signal. Rescue Jayla and Malik, if they're still alive, and destroy whatever machine is driving the evolution of the undead. Echo 6 rolled out under cover of night, the sky painted in sickly green hues from the northern aurora storms. As they neared Zone Theta, all signs of human life disappeared. The roads became overgrown. The trees, dead but still standing, twisted unnaturally, as if something in the soil had warped them. They stopped half a mile from the main structure, a monolithic, dome-shaped facility half buried in the earth. Cameras still rotated silently on rusted stalks. Blue lights flickered from deep inside. Something watched them. June whispered, "You feel that? Like the ground's breathing." They infiltrated through a service tunnel beneath the dome, bypassing rotted security doors and collapsed hallways. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Then, they found them. Pods. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Filled with partially infected humans, wired to machines, kept alive, blinking in and out of consciousness. The infected weren't feeding on them, they were integrating with them. Cordell, eyes wide, said, "They're not killing anymore. They're merging. Using human brains to create processing units. It's not just infection, it's assimilation." Suddenly, the facility lit up. The lights turned red. The walls vibrated with a deep, mechanical tone. A massive screen on the far wall flickered to life. On it, a face. Glitching. Twisting. Built from fragments of facial scans, soldiers, civilians, infected. All layered together. It spoke in a fractured voice. "You are late." The voice echoed through the chamber. Mechanical limbs unfolded from the ceiling above them. The infected poured in from the shadows, their movements smooth, coordinated, like parts of a machine. Riker raised his weapon. "Fall back." Defensive formation. Gunfire lit the chamber. June and Blade laid down suppressive fire while Cordell worked to hack the pod controls. "I found them," she shouted. "Jayla and Malik, they're in the central node." Riker sprinted forward, blasting his way through the horde. He reached the core chamber, a sphere filled with fluid, cables, and light. Inside floated Jayla, barely conscious, face masked, neural wires jammed into her skull. Malik was next to her. He looked worse. The machine's voice returned. "They are the bridge. They have seen both sides. They will guide the next evolution." Riker planted charges around the base of the sphere. "Not today." Jayla's eyes fluttered open. "Riker, you have to burn it. Burn everything." He yanked the neural cords free. Alarms blared. The entire chamber began to collapse. Malik stirred. "It's learning," Always learning, it'll spread through airwaves next, kill the signal. Echo 6 regrouped at the tunnel entrance, barely making it out as the facility exploded behind them, fire bursting from the earth, smoke painting the sky. But just before it all went dark, they heard it, one final pulse on the radio. Phase 1. Complete. Riker looked up at the burning sky. This wasn't the end. Cordell nodded grimly. It was just the awakening. To be continued in Part 8, the final stand. The world had already ended. Or so Riker had thought. As the smoke from the exploding research facility settled, they stood in a desolate wasteland, silent, empty, save for the wind and the lingering buzz of malfunctioning radios. But now, there was no more time for reflection. The final signal, the one that had echoed through the facility before it crumbled, was still pulsing faintly through the air. It was a message, not just from the machine intelligence that had been lurking in the shadows, but from something else. The battlefield was no longer just in the human world, it was spilling into the very fabric of reality itself. The undead had evolved. The infected had learned. And now, something even more dangerous was growing, silent, waiting for its next phase to begin. We didn't kill it, Blade said quietly, checking his weapon. We only delayed it. Riker scanned the horizon. No. We only stopped its progress. But the signal, it's still out there. And it's still spreading. Cordell was already scanning the comms, furiously typing on her portable terminal. You're right. The system we destroyed in Zone Theta was only a prototype. A relay. The true machine, it's not a single entity. It's a network. A consciousness that's interconnected across the globe. Great, June muttered, cleaning her rifle. So what? Now we've got a super-intelligent zombie army building their own mind network? It's worse than that, Cordell said. Her voice was taut, heavy with the weight of what she was about to reveal. We've underestimated them. They've found a way to access every communication system on Earth. Every satellite, every radio tower. They can transmit their signal anywhere, and the infected are getting smarter, adaptable. They can hijack technology, including drones, machines, vehicles. Riker clenched his fists. So, they don't just walk anymore. They think. Exactly, she replied. They've built themselves into the infrastructure. The longer we let them exist, the faster they'll adapt. They'll control everything. Jayla, now recovered from the ordeal, stepped forward. And if they control everything, then they won't just overrun the Earth. They'll dominate it. Take us out, one piece at a time. Malik, who had been mostly silent, now spoke up. We need to cut them off from the grid. Completely. Riker nodded. Where's the heart of this network? Where do we strike? Cordell scrolled through data streams on her terminal, piecing the puzzle together. There's a data center, a military-grade facility located on the western coast, near the remains of an old city. The facility houses the main servers that run the network. If we can access it, we can deploy a full shutdown sequence, disrupt the signal permanently. The catch? Blade asked, looking at Cordell with skepticism. They'll be expecting us, she replied bluntly. The facility is heavily guarded, not by just infected, but by automated defenses. We'll be up against more than the undead this time. Riker stood tall, his resolve solidifying. Then we go in hard and fast. We hit them before they can regroup. We'll take out their control center, no signal, no system. And if we can, we'll shut down whatever AI's guiding them. This ends today. The group prepared for the final push. The last of their weapons were loaded. Ammo was checked. A somber silence settled over them as they made their way west, toward the heart of the undead network. The coast loomed on the horizon, darkened by the impending storm. It was a race against time. The undead were not just creatures, they were now an intelligence, an army, a force of nature. The journey to the facility was harrowing. The area had become a dead zone, cities half collapsed, overrun by zombies, automated machines, and drones that had once been used for military purposes. Now they roamed aimlessly, their programming corrupted by the machine intelligence. Riker's team stayed low, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon, knowing they were always being watched. As they approached the facility, the ground trembled. A massive defensive wall surrounded the center, heavily fortified. A lone tower rose from the center of it all, its lights flashing with an eerie pulse. "We're here," Riker muttered. "Let's finish this." Echo 6 stormed the gates, weapons firing. They fought tooth and nail against waves of infected, automated drones, and machine-controlled soldiers. Every step felt like an eternity, but they pressed on. Inside the central tower, the heart of the machine's intelligence awaited. A huge server room, filled with rows of blinking equipment, surrounded by more armored undead, each one linked to the system, feeding off its data streams. Riker planted the charges as the team fended off the last of the infected. The countdown began. "Ready?" Riker asked, looking back at the others. One by one, they nodded. The machine's voice echoed in the room, twisted and broken. "You cannot win. We are everything. You are nothing." Riker didn't flinch. "This is where it ends." The charges went off. A massive explosion rocked the facility, tearing through the network, severing the connection, and sending a shockwave through the air. The ground shook as the data center collapsed, its lights flickering out for good. The world grew silent. The final phase of the undead machine was over. The fight had been won. But as the team stood among the ruins, the wind carried a message. A whisper of what might come next. For now, humanity had won, but Riker knew the fight would never truly end. They were the fighters of dead America. And as long as they stood, they would never stop fighting. The end.